The funeral flowers were still fresh when they came for everything. White lilies and pale roses sat wilting in crystal vases throughout the living room, their scent turning cloying in the warm Sacramento afternoon. I hadn't had the heart to throw them out yet, or maybe I simply hadn't had the energy. Grief has a way of making even small tasks feel like moving mountains. I was sitting in Floyd's leather chair in his home office when Sydney and Edwin arrived unannounced. The chair still smelled faintly of his aftershave, cedar, and something faintly smoky. After 22 years of marriage, that scent had become home. Now it felt like a ghost sitting with me. I ran my palms along the arms, feeling the worn smooth places where his hands had rested. Thousands of evenings, while he reviewed contracts, balanced books, planned the next expansion of the business we had built together. The doorbell rang twice, sharp, impatient. I already knew who it was. Sydney entered first, all crisp tailoring and controlled energy. 45 years old, but carrying himself like a man who believed the world still owed him something. His steel-gray eyes, so like Floyd's in color, so different in temperature, swept the room before settling on me. "Colleen," he said. "Not Mom, not anymore. Just Colleen, the way one addresses the housekeeper or the accountant." Edwin followed half a step behind, softer around the edges, hair thinning earlier than it should. His face arranged in the practiced expression of concern he used whenever he wanted something. At 42, he still looked like the boy who used to hide behind his older brother when company came over. Some things never change. "We need to talk about practical matters," Sydney announced without preamble. He didn't sit. Neither did Edwin. They stood like bailiffs delivering notice. I stayed in the chair. It felt like the last piece of Floyd still defending me. "Practical matters," I repeated slowly. My voice sounded thin even to my own ears. "The estate," Sydney said. "The properties. The business interests. We need clarity on distribution." Distribution. Such a clean, bloodless word for carving up a life. Edwin stepped closer, softening his tone the way people do when they think they're being kind to a child or an invalid. "We know this is difficult. Losing Dad so suddenly. It's been hard on all of us." All of us. I almost laughed. A dry, soundless thing trapped in my throat. They had flown in for the funeral. Sydney from San Francisco, Edwin from Los Angeles. They had worn dark suits, delivered tasteful eulogies, accepted condolences with appropriate gravity. But during the 3 longest months of Floyd's illness, the chemo, the nausea, the middle-of-the-night pain that no morphine could fully touch, I had been alone. Holding his hand, changing sheets soaked with sweat, arguing with doctors, sleeping in a chair beside his hospital bed while machines beeped and hissed. They had not been there for any of it. "What exactly do you need clarity on?" I asked. Sydney opened his briefcase with the same theatrical precision he used in courtrooms. A thick manila folder appeared. He placed it on Floyd's desk, the same desk where Floyd used to leave me little notes every morning. "Good morning, beautiful. Coffee's on. Love you always." "The will is clear," Sydney continued. "The Sacramento house, current market value around $850,000, goes jointly to Edwin and me. The Lake Tahoe villa, $750,000, also joint. Business assets, conservatively valued at $400,000, split between us." Each number landed like a slap. Our home. The place where we'd hung Christmas stockings for 22 years, where we'd danced in the kitchen at 2 a.m. after too much wine, where Floyd had once dropped to one knee in the garden, not to propose we were already married, but to tell me he would choose me every day for the rest of his life. Gone. The Tahoe villa. Our honeymoon. Our 10th anniversary. The weekend Floyd proposed renewing our vows because once wasn't enough. Gone. I felt my fingers dig into the leather. "And me?" I asked quietly. Edwin shifted. Sydney didn't flinch. "The life insurance," Sydney said. $200,000. That should be sufficient. Sufficient. 22 years of marriage. 22 years of hosting his business dinners, managing the household, stepping back from my own career so he could build his empire. 22 years of being called Mom when it was convenient, and Colleen when it wasn't. $200,000 to start over at 63. "I see," I said, though I didn't see it all. Floyd had looked me in the eyes, many times, and promised, "You'll always be taken care of, Colleen. No matter what happens to me." I had believed him. "It's not personal," Edwin added, voice dripping synthetic sympathy. Dad always intended the family assets to stay within the bloodline. You understand. Bloodline, as if love could be measured in chromosomes. As if 22 years of shared laughter, shared grief, shared beds meant less than DNA. Of course we're not heartless, Sydney continued smoothly. You can stay in the house for 30 days while you make arrangements. We think that's generous. Generous. I looked around the office. The first edition novels Floyd loved. The framed photograph on the desk, not of his sons, but of us on our wedding day, both laughing at something the photographer had said. The window overlooking the garden we had planned together, rows by rows. There is one more thing, Sydney said. He pulled out a second, thinner document. Dad accumulated significant medical bills in his final months. Insurance covered most, but there's still about $180,000 outstanding. Since you were his spouse and made many of the treatment decisions, the creditors are looking to you. The room tilted. $180,000 in debt, $200,000 from insurance, $20,000 left to rebuild an entire life. But the estate, I began. Assets are tied up in probate, Edwin interrupted. And under the terms of the will, those debts are considered separate, personal, unfortunate, but legal. I stared at them. These two men who had called me Mom at the graveside 3 days earlier. Sydney in his perfectly pressed charcoal suit, Edwin with his soft jaw and practiced concern. I need time to process this, I said. Of course, Sydney replied, already standing. The 30-day clock starts tomorrow, and those medical bills, the longer they sit, the more interest accrues. They left without hugging me, without offering so much as a cup of tea. I stayed in Floyd's chair long, after their expensive car disappeared. Down the driveway, the house felt bigger, emptier. The silence pressed against my ears. Eventually my hand drifted to the small drawer where Floyd kept personal things, old receipts, spare keys, ticket stubs from concerts we'd attended decades ago. My fingers brushed something cold and metallic. A small brass key, worn smooth. I had never seen it before. I held it up to the window. Late afternoon light caught the edges. It didn't match any lock in the house. Not the front door, not the filing cabinets, not the gun safe in the garage. Why had Floyd kept it hidden here in his most private space? Through the window, I saw Edwin's car still idling at the curb. The brothers stood beside it, heads close together, laughing. Actually laughing, dividing up houses and villas and futures while I sat inside, holding a single key and the ruins of 22 years. Something shifted inside me then. Not despair, not yet. Something colder, sharper. They thought I was finished. They thought grief would keep me docile, that legal documents and polite cruelty would be enough to erase me. They were wrong. Floyd had always been 10 steps ahead of everyone, even his own sons. After 22 years at his side, some of that cunning had become mine. I slipped the key into my pocket. Tomorrow I would start looking for the lock it belonged to. Tonight I would let them celebrate. Let them believe they had already won. The next morning I woke before dawn. The brass key already warm from being clutched in my hand all night. I hadn't slept much. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Sydney's cold smile, Edwin's synthetic sympathy, the manila folder slapping onto Floyd's desk like a judge's gavel. But mostly I saw the key, small, ordinary, yet somehow the only thing that still felt like Floyd reaching out to me. I made coffee in the kitchen we used to share, strong, black, the way he liked it, and carried the mug back to his office. The house was too quiet without his footsteps, without the low hum of his voice on the phone with clients. I sat in the leather chair again and began the search. I started methodically. Every drawer, every cabinet, every shelf. I checked under the desk, behind the books, inside the old cigar box where he kept spare change and theater tickets. From our last date night 3 years ago, nothing fit the key. By noon, my back ached, and frustration was turning into something darker. I pulled out Floyd's wallet, the one the hospital had returned in a plastic bag along with his watch and wedding ring. I hadn't been able to look at it until now. I flipped through the worn leather compartments. Credit cards long expired, a faded photo of us at Tahoe, a dry cleaning receipt from last spring, and then, tucked behind his driver's license, a small white business card. First National Bank J Street branch, handwritten on the back in Floyd's neat block letters, 379. My pulse jumped. I knew the bank. We'd had accounts there for years. But I'd never seen this card, never heard him mention a safety deposit box. I dressed quickly. Simple black slacks, white blouse, the same clothes I'd worn to too many hospital visits, and drove downtown. The bank smelled of polished marble and old paper. Patricia, the branch manager, recognized me immediately. She was a soft-spoken woman in her late 50s with kind eyes that crinkled when she smiled. "Mrs. Whitaker," she said, coming around the counter to take my hands. "I was so sorry to hear about Floyd. He was always such a gentleman." "Thank you," I managed. I think he left something here. A box, number 379? Her expression shifted. Not surprise exactly, but recognition. "Mr. Whitaker was very specific," she said quietly. "He added your name to the access list about 6 months ago. Come with me." We descended narrow marble stairs to the vault. The air grew cooler, heavier. Patricia inserted her master key, then stepped aside so I could use mine. The key turned smoothly. The box was larger than I expected. Not the small envelope-sized kind, but a medium one, heavy when I pulled it out. Patricia showed me to a private viewing room with a single table and chair, then closed the door softly behind her. I sat. For a long moment I simply stared at the metal lid. Then I opened it. No will on top, no insurance policy. Instead, stacks of documents, printed emails, handwritten notes, photographs, bank statements, personal, secret. The first thing I saw was an envelope in Floyd's handwriting. For Colleen, open only after reading everything else. I set it aside with trembling fingers. Next, a printed email chain dated 8 months earlier. From Sydney Whitaker. To Marcus Crawford. Subject, timeline update. Marcus, Dad's getting worse. Doctors say maybe 6 months at best. We need to move faster on the transfer protocols. Can you expedite the paperwork we discussed? Reply from Marcus. Sydney, documents prepared as requested. Once your father signs, business assets restructure under the shell companies. Personal properties transfer immediately upon death. What about the wife? Sydney's reply. Colleen won't be a problem. She doesn't understand the business side. By the time she figures it out, it'll be too late. Dad trusts us completely. I read it twice. Then a third time. They had been planning this while Floyd lay in the hospital bed, while I spoon-fed him ice chips and wiped his forehead with cool cloths, while I argued with oncologists about experimental treatments, while I told him over and over that he was going to beat this. His own sons had been plotting to steal from him. Next came bank statements for an account I'd never seen, Whitaker Holdings, LLC. Current balance, $4,700,000. Handwritten note from Floyd, clipped to the top page. Colleen, this is our real savings. The boys think everything is tied up in the house and business. I moved the bulk here months ago to protect us. $4.7 million. We weren't just comfortable. We were wealthy. Floyd had hidden it, not from me, but from them. My hands shook so badly I had to set the papers down. A thick folder labeled Private Investigation. Confidential came next. Photographs, Sydney entering a Reno casino at 2:17 a.m. Exiting at dawn 3 days later. More photos. Different dates, same pattern. Financial records. Sydney owed $230,000 in gambling debts to private lenders and casino. Credit lines. Edwin's section was worse. His consulting business was a shell. Failed investment schemes. Nearly $300,000 of client money, mostly elderly retirees, gone. Some had already filed complaints with the state bar and financial regulators. Both sons were drowning. Then a medical report, not from Floyd's oncologist, but a neurologist, dated 3 months before his death. Summary: patient shows no signs of cognitive impairment or diminished capacity. Mental faculties sharp, decision-making ability fully intact. Floyd had been of sound mind, completely, which meant the will Sydney and Edwin had shown me, the one cutting me out, could not have been the final one, not if Floyd had been competent. The last document, a copy of a will dated 6 weeks before Floyd died. Everything to Colleen Whitaker. Modest annual trusts for Sydney and Edwin, enough to live on. But nothing they could squander in one lump sum. Margin note in Floyd's hand. Original held by Mitchell and Associates. Not Morrison Firm. 2 wills. The one they showed me was old, superseded. I finally reached for Floyd's letter. My dearest Colleen, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and the boys have shown their true colors. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you while I was alive. I needed to be sure. When they started visiting more during my illness, not out of love, but positioning, I grew suspicious. I hired James Mitchell, a private investigator. We uncovered everything. They forged signatures, moved money. Plan to use an outdated will. But here's what they don't know. I mortgaged the Sacramento house, 1.2 million lien. Lake Tahoe Villa, $800,000 lien. The money from those loans is in Whitaker Holdings. Only you have access. They think they're inheriting valuable assets. They're inheriting debt. A poison pill. The life insurance they mentioned is real, but it's $500,000, not $200,000. There's another policy for $300,000. They don't know about. Martin Morrison was cut out 2 months ago. The boys must have gone back to him after I died, thinking he still had control. The final paragraph blurred through tears. I know this seems cruel, but I couldn't let them steal from you the way they stole from others. They made their choices. Now they live with them. Take the money. Start fresh. Don't look back. Love always. Floyd. Attached business card for Mitchell and Associates. Note, call immediately after reading. I sat in that small windowless room for nearly an hour. Floyd hadn't abandoned me. He'd protected me, right up to the end and beyond. And Sydney and Edwin weren't just greedy. They were thieves, betrayers of their own father. But another fear crept in. If they were desperate enough to steal from a dying man, what would they do when they discovered their inheritance was actually a financial grave? Would they come after me? Blame me? Threaten me? I closed the box, kept only the letter, the business card, and copies of the most damning emails. Tomorrow I would call Mitchell. Tonight I had a dinner invitation from Edwin and Bianca. Family time, he'd called it. I looked at my reflection in the polished metal of the box. The woman staring back wasn't broken anymore. She was calm, focused, and very, very angry. I slipped the letter into my purse. I would go to dinner. I would smile, nod, listen to their plans for our properties, and all the while I would know exactly what waited for them. Floyd had been 10 steps ahead. Now it was my turn. I drove to Martin Morrison's office with the windows down, letting the crisp Sacramento River breeze cut through the car. It felt like washing away the last traces of the scared woman. I had been only days earlier. In my purse, Floyd's letter, the real will, copies of every damning document, and the gift deed James Mitchell had prepared that morning. The conference room smelled of fresh coffee and tension. Sydney and Edwin sat on one side of the long mahogany table, suits impeccable, but faces drawn. Bianca hovered behind Edwin like a nervous shadow in her designer dress. Martin Morrison presided at the head, looking like a man who had just realized the ground beneath him was quicksand. James Mitchell sat beside me, briefcase open, calm as stone. "Colleen," Sydney began the moment I sat. His voice carried that courtroom authority he loved so much. "We're glad you're here. Things have gotten confusing. We need to clear up some misinformation." "Misinformation," I echoed mildly. Edwin leaned forward, palms flat on the table. "Someone's been feeding you false documents. Claims about new wills, hidden accounts. We're worried you're being taken advantage of in your grief." Martin cleared his throat. "Colleen, I have to be honest, I'm confused too. Floyd never mentioned changing firms or executing new documents. If there's a superseding will, I need to see it." "That's because Floyd no longer trusted your firm," I said quietly. The room froze. Martin's face flushed. Sydney's eyes narrowed. Edwin made a small, strangled sound. I pulled Floyd's letter from my purse and placed it in the center of the table like evidence in a trial. "Floyd discovered someone in your office was leaking estate details to his sons. He couldn't be certain it was you, Martin. So he moved everything to James Mitchell 8 months ago." "That's absurd," Sydney snapped. "Dad trusted Martin implicitly." "Did he?" I met Sydney's gaze. "Then why did he hire a private investigator to track your gambling debts? Why did he move $4.7 million into accounts only I can access?" Edwin choked. 4.7. That's impossible. Dad didn't have that kind of liquidity." James Mitchell opened his briefcase and began laying out documents, one by one. Bank statements, mortgage records, surveillance photos, forged loan signatures, wire transfers. "Your father was wealthier than either of you knew," Mitchell said evenly. "He built that security for Colleen, and he documented everything you did." Sydney's hand shot out, snatching a photo of himself leaving a Reno casino at dawn. "This is fabricated," he said, but his voice cracked on the last word. "It's not," Mitchell replied. "And the mortgages are real. The Sacramento house carries a $1.2 million lien. The Tahoe Villa, $800,000. Your father took those loans deliberately. The properties you think you're inheriting are underwater by $600,000. The moment you take title," Bianca gasped. Edwin's face drained to the color of paper. Martin stared at the documents like they were venomous. "Colleen, this changes everything." "No," I said. "It changes nothing. The real will, the one executed 6 weeks before Floyd's death, leaves everything to me, with one clause." I slid the will across the table. "I leave the decision of what, if anything, my sons, Sidney and Edwin, shall inherit entirely to my beloved wife, Colleen, trusting in her wisdom and judgment to determine what they truly deserve." Sidney read it, then read it again. His knuckles whitened around the edges of the paper. "You can't do this," Edwin whispered. "I already have. I placed the gift deed in front of them. I'm giving you exactly what you tried to give me. The house, the villa, the business assets, all of it, as is." Sidney scanned the deed. His eyes widened as he reached the mortgage disclosures. "You're giving us properties worth $1.6 million, with $2 million in debt." "Precisely," I said. "You'll have 30 days to refinance or assume the loans. Given your credit, Sidney's $230,000 in gambling markers, Edwin's $300,000 in client losses, no bank will touch you. You'll face foreclosure, and you'll still owe the deficiency judgments." Bianca began to cry softly. "This will ruin us. We'll lose everything. You should have thought of that before you stole from your dying father," I replied. My voice was calm, almost gentle. Edwin looked up, something like awe flickering behind the fear. "He really planned every detail. Your father was smarter than either of you ever gave him credit for," I said. Sidney tried one last angle. "We can negotiate, we can—" "No," I cut him off. "Sign the acceptance papers. Agree never to contact me again except through attorneys. Or Mitchell files charges tomorrow. Elder financial abuse, grand larceny, wire fraud. The evidence is overwhelming. You'd both face prison." The silence stretched. Sidney looked at Edwin. Edwin looked at the floor. They signed. As they filed out, Sidney paused at the door. "This isn't over, Colleen." "Yes," I said, "it is." 3 months later, I stood on the deck of a small cottage in Carmel by the sea. The Pacific stretched endless and gray-blue below me, fog curling in like smoke. I had paid $1.2 million cash, still leaving millions in secure accounts. The cottage had wide windows, a stone fireplace, and a neglected garden that called to me the moment I saw it. Every morning I worked the soil. Roses first, hybrid teas like the ones Floyd and I had planted in Sacramento. Then lavender, rosemary, salvia. I learned the names of native plants, the rhythm of coastal watering, the patience required for perennials to establish. I joined a local gardening club, took watercolor classes at the community college, volunteered 3 mornings a week at the animal shelter, walking dogs along the beach trails. Simple things, revolutionary things. One afternoon, while deadheading spent blooms, a young woman stopped at my gate. "Excuse me," she said. "I'm Sarah Mitchell, James's daughter. Dad thought you might be interested in some volunteer work." She told me about her organization, support for women escaping financial abuse, emotional manipulation, coercive control within families. I thought of the woman I had been, terrified, grieving, believing $20,000 in 30 days was all I deserved. "I might," I said. 2 months later, the Floyd Whitaker Foundation for Financial Justice opened its doors. Free legal consultations, financial literacy workshops, emergency funds for women rebuilding after family betrayal. We partnered with shelters, elder abuse hotlines, state bar associations. It wasn't the legacy Sidney and Edwin had planned to inherit. It was the one Floyd had always wanted. Sometimes, in the evening when the fog rolled thick and the garden lights came on, I sat on the deck with a cup of tea and thought of him. I wondered if he would approve. Then I remembered his letter, his quiet, meticulous planning, his refusal to let greed win. He would have been proud, not of the revenge, though it had its sharpness, but of the life I had built afterward, of the garden coming back to life, of the women now finding their own keys, their own safety deposit boxes, their own strength. I raised my cup to the ocean, to Floyd, to second chances, and to the women still waiting to discover they were never powerless. They just hadn't found the right lock yet. Did you enjoy Colleen's story? I have to say, it hit me right in the heart. The way she turned pain into power, betrayal into a brand new beginning. It's one of those tales that stays with you long after it ends. So tell me honestly, which part touched you the most? What would you have done in her place? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one and love hearing from you. And hey, where are you watching from today? Drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this story has traveled. If this story moved you and you'd like to help me keep sharing more real, emotional life stories like this one, you can send a super thanks. It truly means the world and allows me to create even more content for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for your love, your support, and for watching until the very end. You have no idea how much it keeps me going. On your screen right now are 2 more powerful life stories that I personally love and think you'll be blown away by. There are so many more waiting for you on the channel. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one. I'll see you in the comments and in the next life story. With all my love and deepest respect,